Right, look at this audience, all in their seats and ready to start. I'd like to welcome you all to our Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit public meeting. My name is Mike Potter. I'll be your MC this evening. This meeting is being recorded for anyone who couldn't participate and wants to view it later. The link to the video will be available on the project webpage and the Valley Water YouTube channel. For our online audience, which is on Zoom, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat box to ask any questions or to raise your virtual hand to speak, and we'll unmute you. Staff will respond to your questions at the end of the presentation. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we have several Valley Water directors here tonight. We have Director John Varela, who you'll be hearing from in a moment. We have Director Jim Bell in the audience. Our Vice Chair Richard Santos is here. And joining online is Director Schwea. And we also have the Mayor of Morgan Hill, Mark Turner. I knew I was going to do that. John Varela, Mark Turner, got it. Former mayor and current mayor. And also Councilmember Marilyn Liebers is here. And who represents this district, she wants you to know. And then also Councilmember Iwanaga is here, or will be joining us shortly. And with that, I'd like to introduce even further Director John Varela, a member of our board of directors who represents this area where the project is located. He was appointed to the Water District's board in December of 2015 and elected by voters in 2016, 2018, and 2022 to represent this district, which includes Gilroy, Morgan Hill, unincorporated, getting a little loud, unincorporated San Martin, and parts of East and South San Jose. Maybe I was talking too loud. Director Varela, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You know, it's interesting, but I think you gave all my talking points away and all the introductions that I was going to make, so thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Varela, and I've been a resident of Morgan Hill now. I'm on my 48th year. Can you believe that? And I want to introduce my lovely bride who's sitting in the back of the room. Many of you know her, Ms. Vivian Varela, affectionately known as my boss. So, you know, we're really excited about having you here tonight. Valley Water's Board of Directors will be addressing this issue on the 25th board meeting. You're more than welcome to attend that. I lost my voice here somewhere. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So it'll be again heard on the 25th by the Board of Directors. We're not taking any action or discussing anything in regards to the EIR. So bear that in mind when you are asking your questions. We will not be responding to those questions. But thank you, Mike, for making that introduction to me tonight. I'm glad to see everyone who has joined us tonight to receive the latest information about our work at Anderson Dam, the outlet tunnel, and the environmental review process. A quick question: how many of you in the audience have actually toured Anderson Dam and our tunnels by raise of hand? Really? Oh my God, very few of you. The last 2 years, we've had multiple tours at Anderson and also of the tunnel as well. So, Ryan, are we going to continue those tours, or are we done with those? Okay, so we will make sure that we will be notifying through media, social media, etc., the next tour dates that we will be announcing at that particular time. So I want to continue on. Rebuilding Anderson Dam is Valley Water's top public safety project, a regional water supply, and provide environmental benefits for generations to come. Since we started construction on the project in 2021, we've completed the tunnel excavation and waterproofing. Once we finish building the tunnel, we can start on the larger dam project, which is actually the Seismic Retrofit project lowering of the dam. Tonight, we will present an overview of the final EIR content, including changes that were made to the EIR throughout the environmental review process. So I appreciate everyone, and also those that are on the virtual meeting on Zoom tonight, taking the time to participate tonight. Thank you all for being here. I'll turn the microphone back over to me. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Director Varela. And for today's presentation, we have Ryan McCarter, the Deputy Operating Officer for Valley Water's Dam Safety and Capital Delivery Division. Ryan will first give you an overview of the construction progress, We'll then hear from a presentation from Wendy Young, Environmental Services Manager, about the final environmental impact report. For our Zoom audience, remember to enter your questions in the Q&A box or to raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you so you can ask your question. Ryan, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mike. Appreciate you all coming out here tonight to hear about the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. As Director Varela mentioned, very important project for Valley Water and this community, Morgan Hill community and South County, and the effects that happen, and the safety for this dam is very crucial for your area here. So thank you for being here. And so just looking at the dam here, this is an older photo, and as I jump to the next slide, you can kind of see some changes with that view here. So you can see the work that's gone on the upper parking lot, and then down below the tunnel portal. So just to kind of see some of the progress we've made with the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. But anyway, I'll share the agenda here that we're going to talk about this evening in the presentation. We'll talk about the project schedule, the project background, we'll give an update on the tunnel project. And then we'll do a project overview, and then Wendy will give an overview of the environmental impact review process and the next steps. Okay, so this slide, we've shared this before, but I think it's helpful to kind of bring some clarity to the different acronyms and the different things that are going on related to Anderson, as well as the major Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project itself. So on the right over here, you see the FOCP. This is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for Order Compliance Project. So we call this the FOCP. And actually today is the 5-year anniversary from when we received the directive, February 20th, 2020, to drain Anderson Reservoir for safety reasons down from our previous restriction, which is around 60% that was mandated by the state. But FERC ordered us to drain that reservoir down to dead pool. So essentially we have no water in the reservoir, although it still holds some, but we can't actively use any of that water supply anymore. So along with that project and not having that availability of water supply, there's a lot of different components came out of that order. So first we have the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures project. So this is related to the tunnel project. When we open up the diversion flows, we have to have a way to convey those increased flows in a constricted area of Coyote Creek in San Jose. So this is really important to get that project underway. So that was one component that got started, and that project is wrapping up. So we actually had a press event this morning out there at the Coyote Creek in San Jose. So great progress there. We also have the Cross Valley Pipeline extension. This is an extension off of an imported water pipeline that can help us put water into Coyote Creek, just downstream of Oger Ponds, just upstream of Coyote Creek Golf Course. And that allows us to add water to the creek to do groundwater recharge, as well as just for environmental flow. So keep the creek wet using imported water coming all the way from the Sierras. So then the Coyote Creek Stream Augmentation Fish Protection Measure. It's a mouthful, longest project name ever. We call it the chillers. This is a component that's being built at the Coyote pumping plant that could chill imported water to a suitable temperature and release it just downstream of Anderson Dam. So this is right there across the street from the dam on Cochran Road. And then we have the Coyote Percolation Dam Replacement Project. This was also part of the FOCP. We replaced the steel flashport dam with a bladder dam that could be lowered and raised with the push of a button. And that project's also wrapping up, just a few more electrical components there. Then, of course, we have the Anderson Dam Tunnel project that I'll talk about a bit more. And this is needed to really start the next phase of the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. So it's primarily going to be used to divert the flows while we rebuild the dam. So that's the FOCP, and we're well underway on all of these. These smaller projects are just about done, and we're still working through the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. But I'll get through the schedule on the subsequent slide. And then we have the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. We hear this a lot. We say ADSRP quite often. I know that we get into a lot of acronyms, and that can get confusing, but what it entails is the seismic retrofit of the embankment of the dam itself. And so I'll talk about how that's going to be performed. And then building a newer higher capacity outlet tunnel and outlet works. There's actually independent outlet works that we'll be able to use for reliability through a seismic event and still be able to get water out of the reservoir in the future. And then replacing the concrete spillway. That's a major component of the project. And then there's also a kind of a incidental increase of the dam crest height about 9 feet higher than it currently is. That doesn't add any capacity to the reservoir volume-wise. That just gives us a little bit more added safety in case there still is a slumping event due to a seismic activity. So that's just an extra safety feature. And then we have these conservation measures that we'll talk about a little bit more tonight, but those are part of the ADSRP, and there's some additional projects such as Odra Ponds and the phase 2 at the Coyote Perk Dam that we're incorporating into the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. All right, so I think I covered a lot about these projects already, but up top you see our schedule on the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit work here. So the design started way back in 2013. We've been working on environmental review and permitting all along. Then, of course, in 2020 is when we had that major shift in our work. When we had that FERC order come in 5 years ago and really broke out all these projects down below, the FERC order compliance project. And that's when we really had to kick off and pull the Anderson Dam tunnel component out of the retrofit project and make it its own project, which came with a lot of challenges, and then also build these other measures so that we could complete the tunnel project and use it to start the retrofit. So moving through here, we've started our procurement process. So we've started advertising to contractors for pre-qualifications, and we actually just did receive pre-qualification applications for construction contractors for the retrofit project. And then we've got, we're planning to give the notice to proceed to such contractor in mid-2026, and then hit the ground running and breaking ground in early 2027 and working through the construction phase you see here. Okay, so just some graphics to highlight what I've already discussed, the different components of the retrofit project. So right here in the center, this gold blob you see here is the embankment dam itself. And so we will be taking that down and replacing it. And the reason is when it was built in 1950, there's liquefiable materials in the upstream slope and the foundation of the dam that could liquefy due to liquefaction during a shaking event and basically slough off into the reservoir, causing a slumping of the crest of the dam. And if the reservoir is full, an overtopping of the dam, and since it is made of soil and rock, it would eventually erode away the whole dam, which would be a very catastrophic failure. So we'll be taking it down, replacing it the right way. I'll go through some of the steps on the subsequent slide. You can also see in purple and blue here, the high-level outlet works and low-level outlet works. So there are two independent methods to move water from the reservoir out into Coyote Creek or into our water supply system directly into a pipe. So the low-level outlet works will be our main point of water supply use, and the high-level outlet works will be for an emergency drawdown in the future. Up top, you see the spillway here. This is if the reservoir does spill to its limit, it will spill down this concrete channel. This exists here. We'll be replacing this concrete channel with a bigger and badder spillway that can convey larger flows, up to about 95,000 cubic feet per second. If anyone's curious about the numbers. And we'll also be taking this portion of what we call the unlined spillway just below the concrete portion. This is really just an unlined channel, almost like a creek. Now, before it gets to the falls here above Live Oak Park, this will also be lined with concrete. So we're actually going to have a super elevated curve and extend that concrete out to the falls as part of the project. You can also see the Coyote Creek North Channel and South Channel. There's several improvements happening here to help dissipate the larger flow releases that will be coming out of the project. The hydroelectric facility across the street on Cochrane Road, that's going to be decommissioned as part of the project. It's very small hydroelectric facility, and we're getting out of the power business. And here you see Basalt Hill borrow area down below here. So this is going to be one of the main borrow areas to get rock to rebuild the dam. This is a rock source that they used for the original dam. You can actually see some of the outcrops currently. So we're going to be mining into this, and this is Rosenden Park just above Basalt Hill borrow area. So there'll be kind of a mining operation here with terrace slopes and blasting to get the rock out of that area. Okay, so this image goes through the sequence of the embankment reconstruction, and it's really hard to read all the text here for you all, and even in this slide, but I think we're going to blow this up onto one of those nice boards for future meetings so people can really get in close and read through all this. But just walking through quickly, I think we've shared this in other fashions before, but the reason this project takes 6+ years to complete is because there's only so much work we can do in a single year, because we can't work during the winter. So we have to divert all the rain flows that come in each winter while we have an interim dam, is what we call it, in place. So the first year of the dam construction, which is actually year 2 of the construction project, we'll come in and take off about the top third of the dam and store that in one of the material handling and stockpile areas. And then we'll sit through the winter and divert the flows through the tunnel while they come in, and then we'll come pick that up in the spring of the next year and take in the upstream and downstream slopes, about another third of the volume of the embankment itself. And then same thing, divert those flows during the winter. And then in year 4, we'll come in and take down the rest of the material we'll be removing, leaving this remnant core. This is like a clay section that's in the center of the dam. And then also bringing back in new material and building our first part of the new dam. So that all has to happen actually in 1 year. This is year 4 here at the bottom and at the top right here. So that's going to be a really critical year, a lot of work to be completed during that dry season window. And then again, we'll wait through the wet season and use this as our interim dam to divert the flows. Then in year 5, we'll come in and build out the slopes just like we took them down, more or less. And then we'll wait again through that winter and then come in year 6 and top off the dam to its final configuration. And at the bottom here, you can see what the final cross section of the embankment will look like. This image shows a map of the reservoir outlined here in red. This is a full pool, and this is really just showing the project impact area. You see some of their lines down here showing the main avenue pipeline that will have some work going on, as well as a telemetry line out to Coyote pumping plant. And then down below, you can see some features here with Coyote Creek, but just wanted to point out the different stockpile areas throughout the reservoir, these blue shaded areas. And then there's a borrow area here in yellow, a Packwood, the Salt Hill borrow area here in yellow. This is a disposal area in the reservoir where we'll take material that will not be used. And you can see these roads that come through the reservoir. And this is how we keep all of the work as much as possible inside the reservoir area and not out in the greater Morgan Hill area down below here. Okay, so a quick update on the Anderson Dam Tunnel project that's been in construction for almost 4 years now. So this kind of just goes through the different components, and the slide is a little light, but so I'm not sure, but this is where the reservoir sits here. And the first piece that we've completed is the intake and trash rack foundation. So that's this little square here. And so we'll see some photos of that, and that connects to the microtunnel boring machine lake tap. So this small blue section that's also been completed. So we've got an 8-foot diameter steel pipe running out of the reservoir, and that was done with a microtunnel boring machine that started within the tunnel and drove out about 350 feet. It came out about 30 feet below the reservoir water surface, so it came out underwater. So all of this construction for the trash rack and the foundation was all done by divers and barges and all done underwater. So really impressive work that they did there. This red portion you see here is the main part of the tunnel. This has all been excavated, and all the excavation support is completed. And now we're in the phase of lining this tunnel with a special reinforced concrete liner that I'll talk about in a few slides. But the excavation is complete, as well as the high-level outlet works drop shaft that will be incorporated into the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project later. That has been excavated, but also needs the final pipe and lining inside that portion. And then we have the diversion outlet structure that dissipates the energy of the flows that will be coming through the tunnel, and we're diverting water during storms. The construction of the outlet structure itself is complete, and they'll be connecting in the pipes and valves to control the flows here in the next year. And then here you have the north channel. So this has all been lined with rock and large boulders to help dissipate the energy that flows and also protect this channel from eroding when the flows come out. And then we also built what we call the North Channel weir. This is actually a labyrinth weir. If you were able to see really close, there's kind of a zigzag pattern here. That also helps dissipate the energy of the flows coming out of the tunnel and into Coyote Creek. So we'll see some photos of these elements here. So this is an overview, bird's eye view of September 2021, kind of what the site looked like when the grading started here up above the tunnel portal. And then down below here, you can see the difference. We've got the grading done, the concrete section here that supports the slope of the portal. And then the diversion outlet structure here in purple is done. The high-level outlet works drop shaft, that's complete, as I mentioned, and you can see the tunnel here. And then really what you can see in this photo, the big difference is all this rock that was placed down for the north channel, and then also the grading that was done for the extension here. So really, you reopened this north channel that was basically blocked when they built the dam in 1950, but it was a historic channel before the dam was there. And so that will be used for the high flows that we'll be releasing, while the south channel currently along Cochrane Road will take the low flows in the future. Okay, so here's that trash rack I was talking about that will go over the intake pipe. So this is just one panel on there, but this entire trash rack will be covered in these grates, these steel panels here to keep trash and debris from getting sucked into the tunnel. So they were kind of doing a fit up there and pulled it out to take a look. And then here you can see the micro tunnel boring machine when they retrieved that. So when they pulled it out of the water, I think there's a poster back there that shows it. It's a nice red and white paint job before it went through. But this is what it looked like when it came out. So they pulled that out with the barge back in October. So good progress on that. That all went really well. So this is the completed excavation of the main section of the tunnel. So this is about 23 feet across and about 23 feet tall as well. And so the next part of the project is to line this tunnel with a structural concrete lining. So it's about a 2-foot thick reinforced concrete lining that goes all the way around top and bottom of this arch and along the bottom of the tunnel as well. And so in January, they started working on the waterproofing. So there's a waterproofing membrane that goes in between this excavated support and the structural lining. And now they're working on putting the reinforcement for the 2-foot thick lining and then the rebar that goes along with that. It's a major component of this project. There's a really kind of novel idea being used here to protect the tunnel in the case of a seismic offset. If there was a seismic event that shifted the ground and impacted the tunnel, there's what we call articulated tunnel segments. So these 5 or 10 foot long sections are disconnected along the length of the tunnel, and they can kind of move like sliced bread if the ground moves around it. So it's a really good way to protect the tunnel for seismic resiliency. So we're working on that now. These are some photos of the north channel work. So you can see here all the gravel and riprap and boulders that were placed that we saw the bird's eye view of, but you can see up close. This was a lot of work to get this done and complete this channel lining. And then you can see the backside of the diversion outlet structure here. This is where the water will come out. So these 2 11-foot diameter openings will have pipes in them that will come out of the tunnel. That will be one pipe coming out of the tunnel at 13 feet in diameter and then splitting off into 2 11-foot diameter pipes that will go into this structure. And there's baffles inside of here that help dissipate the energy as it comes out and into the new lined north channel here. Okay, so this is an image of kind of a final rendering of what this wall looked like when the project's done. So you can see the elongated concrete spillway here that stands out pretty closely. You can see the north weir here, as well as the high-level outlet works outlet, which is currently the diversion outlet structure. There'll be a new outlet that comes in as part of the retrofit project a little bit further upstream. The dam kind of looks the same as it did before, but it is a little taller, as I mentioned. You'll also see the kind of enlarged section here at Basalt Hill that we'll be mining into. This will be converted into additional parking up above the boat ramp here, so almost doubling the parking lot in size. And then some other recreation features here at the entrance along Cochrane Road. There'll be actually 2 separate entrance and exit points here, and a kind of a queuing area for boat trailers to come into the area and try to get those trailers off Cochrane Road. There was kind of a history of trailers backing up on Cochrane Road out, and it was kind of a safety hazard around this bend here. So, and also the road up to the top of the dam and the parking lot will be widened. The retaining wall and a lot of grading that will go on and really improve that road and that system. So really looking forward to doing all this work and creating a nice recreational facility when we're all done and restore it back to its original purpose. Okay, I'm going to pass the mic over to Wendy. She'll go through the environmental impact report.
Hi, I'm Wendy Young, so I'm the Environmental Services Manager for the Dam Safety Division. Pass my first slide. So I'm going to provide an overview of what our final EIR includes and how it differentiates from our draft EIR. So the overall purpose of the project didn't change. It's to create seismically retrofit the dam and improve the operational efficiency by decommissioning the hydroelectric facility and minimizing environmental impact effects that will happen through the project by implementing conservation measures. And the overall benefits of the project will provide haven't changed either. So they're to increase public safety, provide operational flexibility, allow us to, in the operational flexibility, we're incorporating phase flows, which allow us to both operate the dam so that we continue to provide sustainable drinking water. And we also are providing fish habitat downstream through Coyote Creek. And we're going to restore recreation, as Ryan mentioned. So the 6 project components that are included in the final EIR are the same as the draft EIR. So Ryan went over the seismic retrofit component. That's the biggest, taking the dam up and down. The second is the conservation measures, and I'll go over those in more detail on the next slide. We have a location map that shows where those are. But the conservation measures include Odra Ponds, which is the restoring of about 6 miles of Coyote Creek downstream of the dam. It's a second phase of the Coyote Percolation Dam project that increases the ability for fish to pass through that facility. There's a sediment augmentation program where we actually introduce gravels into Coyote Creek to enhance habitat for fish downstream. And then there's ongoing maintenance of 2 parts of FOCP, which Ryan was mentioning. Those are the projects that have initially gone in that FERC had us start in 2020. So it's the reconnecting of the North Channel just downstream of the dam, and then a steelhead restoration project that's happening in the South Channel of Coyote Creek, right downstream of the dam as well. Those are being installed as part of FOCP, and then during the construction of the dam, we'll be maintaining those to make sure that they continue to provide positive flows through the creek as we're implementing the project. So then the next components that are analyzed in the EIR are post-construction Anderson Dam facilities operations and maintenance, and then operations and maintenance of the conservation measures. So that's kind of ongoing. What do we have to do at the actual dam facility and for those conservation measures to keep them operating the way that they were intended to? Construction monitoring is different monitoring efforts that we have that will be ongoing as we're implementing the project. So those are everything from water quality to looking at different species, air, noise, vibration, and then finally there's post-construction project and phase adaptive management. So what that looks like, that's actually following the entire project, including installation of the conservation measures after the dam seismic retrofit. So looking at the project, we'll be continuing to monitor the project over time. And if there's components of the project that aren't working exactly how we thought they were, they're having different outcomes, you might make updates to the project or to different parts of the conservation measures downstream so that we're getting the overall benefits of the project that we initially intended to. So I wanted to talk about the conservation measures more here because they're easier to see. So obviously this is Anderson Reservoir right here, and then the dam seismic retrofit obviously happens right at where it connects with Coyote Creek downstream. So the conservation measures include the maintenance of the live oak restoration reach. That's the south channel of Coyote Creek, right downstream of the dam that I was talking about. And then there's maintenance of the north channel reach. That's where Ryan was talking about the big outlet structure that's going to come from the tunnel. So both of those will be monitored throughout the construction of the dam to make sure that they're continuing to provide adequate flow capacity, and that the steelhead habitat that's being restored in the live oak restoration reach is maintained as we're doing construction activities. Further downstream, we have the Osier Ponds conservation measure, which is going to take about, it's going to restore about 6 miles of Coyote Creek for steelhead habitat. So in 1997, Coyote Creek jumped out of its historic alignment and went into mining ponds. And so we're going to pull the creek back out of those mining ponds. There's a lot of invasive species, there's temperature issues, and just fish passage issues there. And so restoring that habitat provides 6 miles of habitat for restored habitat for fish, but also other species because it will include an enhanced riparian corridor. And then further downstream, We have phase two, Coyote Perk Dam. So in phase one, like Ryan was saying, in FOCP, we installed a bladder dam, which allows us to control flows easier through that facility and improves fish passage. But as part of this project, there's a second phase that actually improves the fish ladder that is at that project, or that is on the same, it's like right adjacent to the bladder dam. And then there's the fishway leading up to the dam. There's a big pool right now, and there's barriers to fish being able to get through that like area depending on high flows or really low flows. And so that area is going to be enhanced so that through a wider variety of flows, we can use that dam to move it up and down to control the flows so that the fish can actually make it over that facility in a much wider variety of conditions. So finally, we have the sediment augmentation program, and that's going to add gravels into the Coyote Creek system once Osier Ponds, Coyote Percolation Dam Phase 2, and the actual seismic retrofit of the dam are done. We don't want to add those until everything is done so that we're not sending more material down the creek as we're also doing construction along Coyote Creek. So once those components are done, we'll be doing a gravel placement every 5 years and monitoring how that gravel is moving moving down Coyote Creek to enhance stillhead habitat. So this is the overall EIR process, which has gone on for a long time. So it began in 2009, and the NOP, the Notice of Preparation for the draft EIR, was originally filed in 2013, and then designs were undertaken for the project until 2020. And then, as Ryan mentioned, in 2020, FERC came in and ordered Valley Water to implement the interim risk measures, which are the tunnel and the other components that Ryan discussed earlier to enhance protection of the creek in this interim time until we can actually implement the seismic retrofit project. So as those interim risk reduction measures have been implemented, we've been updating the designs for the seismic retrofit project. And we released the draft EIR in September 2023 for a 60-day public review. In August 2024, we released a partially recirculated draft EIR for public review for 45 days. The reason why we did that is because we had to make changes to the project in order for the project to be, the actual construction of the project to be feasible. So there were changes to aesthetics, air quality, greenhouse gas, and noise. We actually had to increase the number of truck trips and extend construction hours so that it was actually feasible to get enough of the project done in each season that it would provide a stable, safe environment that we can close down during the winter each season and continue to stay on schedule for the project. So the final EIR is scheduled to be, the final EIR has been released and is scheduled for certification and project approval next Tuesday by the Valley Water Board. So within the final EIR, the purpose of the final EIR is to include any project changes that have been updated between the draft and the final. So there's little modifications. It's a large, complex project. So there's been little changes in the project that are included in the project description. And then also within certain analyses, depending on resource topics that those impact. So within the contents of the final EIR, so those comments, so the changes to the project are just changes that came up as we moved through the design process. And then they're also in response to comments that we've gotten from agencies and from the public. So the way that the final EIR is, it has underlines and strike throughs. So the same text that is in the draft EIR is in the final EIR, and you're able to see how everything has changed because the underline is all the additional text that's been added, and all the strike through is everything that's been taken out. So that way it's easy to see how things have changed moving through the document. And like I said, the contents of the final EIR, we've responded to public and agency comments, changes since we released the draft EIR, and then we also did updated impact analyses depending on if resource topics were affected by those changes that were made to the draft EIR. So looking at the final EIR, it's a thorough document. It's a really complex project. So there's 3 volumes so that it's easier to navigate through. The first volume includes the project description, environmental setting and impact analysis, and alternatives. And again, that's with the underline and the strikeout, so you can go through and see all the changes that have been made to the project. Volume 2 includes responses to public comments. So we received 90 comments from the 90 overall comments on the draft EIR. And then as part as of the FERC process, they have their own federal compliance process that they're going through. And we had to submit a surrender application because we're decommissioning a hydroelectric facility. And so there were 34 comment letters that were submitted to FERC on the surrender application. The materials are really similar to the draft EIR, so we went ahead and took those comment letters and responded to those as well. And then we had another 11 additional comment letters that came in for the partially recirculated draft EIR. So all of those comments are responded to in volume 2. So chapter 7 of volume 2 has responses to the draft EIR. And then chapter 8 of volume 2 has responses to the partially recirculated draft EIR. And then volume 3 has all the appendices. So the appendices also include changes that have been made depending on changes that were updated for the final EIR. So I just went through how they're divided up into the chapters. So there were 8 main topics that came up across the board. And so we created 8 master responses. And so looking at all of the different letters that came in from both the public and agencies, there were a lot of very similar questions that came up about 8 different topics. And so we took these master responses include the variety of questions that were asked about the same topics. And so that's why these respond to a number of different letters. So the first one is alternative designs for Osier Ponds. That's the project where we're pulling Coyote Creek out of the mining ponds. That project is still continuing to evolve, and it won't be constructed until year 6, once Anderson Dam has been seismically retrofitted. And so it's still in design, and there's still project details being worked out. And so the extent that we could, we updated changes that had occurred to the Osier Ponds design between the draft EIR and the final. The second is steelhead impacts. There were questions about how about the sediment loads going down the creek and how impacts were being offset. And so we included responses there. The Valley Habitat Plan is a habitat conservation plan that reduces the impacts of the project. And so Anderson Dam is a project that's included in that greater plan. And so there's an explanation of how our project impacts fit in with the Valley Habitat Conservation Plan or Valley Habitat Plan, and how that reduces impacts and works within the bigger program that is the Valley Habitat Plan covers a lot of projects. So it clears up how our project fits into that plan in addition to all the other projects that it covers. Rosenden Park is really close, right next to Anderson Dam, and different parts of Rosenden Park have to be closed during construction, especially during our blasting activities. Initially in the EIR, we had a much more conservative estimate. We didn't know exactly how long trails or what areas would have to be closed, and we didn't want to underestimate that. But we have a lot more, now we're a lot more clear. There's only parts of the project, the park that need to be closed in years 4 through 6. And so that the narrowed down time frame for closing different parts of Rosenden Park is explained in that master response. The feral pig presence, Valley Water has entered into agreement with the USDA. They have a regional program to control the overall pig population. And so Valley Water's entered into an agreement with the USDA over the next 5 years to be a part of that program to manage the regional feral pig presence. One of the first areas that they're going to begin implementing the program is near Anderson Reservoir, and that will be rolling out very soon. That is adequacy of the EIR baselines, because this is a really complicated project. It's gone on for a really long time, as you saw in the timeline. The overall conditions out there changed depending on how, when FERC ordered us to draw down the reservoir, and then what the area will look like after the dam is in place and what it looked like historically before any of this started. And so there's different EIR baselines that are included throughout the document so that we did our best to capture the impacts that were happening as a result of the project. And so there's an explanation of why different baselines were used at different times or across different resource topics. 7 is wildfire risk. So this included changes to the wildfire analysis, some more details that were added into looking into the conditions out around the project area. It also includes a more thorough description of the RES, which is the response and evacuation strategy plan. It changed names because there's a similar plan through FERC that the names are almost identical and it was really confusing. And so that is a plan that will be developed with Valley Water, but by the contractor and implemented throughout the project. And we also have a committee that's made up of local jurisdictions and then some local landowners, homeowners as well. And we're going to continue to meet with that committee throughout implementation of the project and continue to hear back about concerns for overall emergency conditions out there. And the RES will be available to that group for review prior to the release too, but it will also be a publicly filed document, so it'll be available for everyone to review prior to being implemented. And then finally, we did an additional health risk assessment for Holiday Lake Estates, and so the details of that are included in in the master response 8. So key project description changes are the construction start date is delayed. So Valley Water is the lead in the state environmental compliance process, and then we're working with FERC, who is the federal lead, and they have their own federal environmental compliance process. In order to combine those processes, it bumped our schedule out where we couldn't get enough work done in 2026, where we could have finished enough of the project to close it up and have it be safe during that first winter. We didn't think we could complete all of the actions that were required. And so we bumped, instead of starting construction in April 2026, the start date for construction is going to be in April 2027. And that increase in time also allows different plans and different documents that are related to the construction process to be done more thoroughly. It was the original timeline that we had basically depended on everything going perfect and a whole bunch of documents being approved very, very quickly. And so this refined schedule is still aggressive, but it actually gives us enough time to work through the process more efficiently and make sure that we're checking all the boxes that we need to in the best way that we can. We also refined the number of haul trips. So like I said, we had to extend construction hours, and we did have to extend some of the numbers of the days throughout different construction years where we have to do construction so that we can actually finish the project. So because this project is really complex, the further we move through the design process, there were just different needs for timelines in the project to get required parts of the project done to meet the overall goal to close it down for the winter. And so we did have to extend some of the hours. And so those changes are shown in the project description. We included the reduction in the overall trail closures in Rosenden Park. And then there were changes in the conservation measures. Like I mentioned, Osier Ponds has had some, Osier Ponds and Coyote Percolation Phase 2 are still in design. And so we included the updates on those projects. And then the sediment augmentation program originally showed that it was starting earlier as construction was happening of the dam, which we would just be adding more material moving down Coyote Creek. And it would actually end up just sitting in Osier Ponds. And so it didn't make sense. And so that particular conservation measure doesn't start until the project is done, when it makes sense to send more gravels down the creek for fish. So within the analysis refinements, so based on those project description refinements, the most major changes to the sections are in air quality, greenhouse gases, and noise, where we did additional modeling to take into consideration the new project timeline and the changes in haul trips. Water quality had a new mitigation measure added. It's going to, so it looks specifically at different measures that can be implemented within construction or within the reservoir during construction activities. So originally there was more of a focus on activities outside of the reservoir. And so we broke them out so it's more specific of what measures can be implemented outside of the reservoir and down Coyote Creek, and then what can be implemented inside the reservoir. And then we made changes to wildfire and feral pigs based on the information that I talked about in the master responses. So the next steps, so we aren't going to answer specific questions about the project tonight, but comments can be submitted to the board up until Tuesday when the project is being heard. But we do want to hear your comments. So there's a couple of different ways that you can provide those. There are comment cards here. So if you could write your comments down, then we'll take those and they'll be submitted to the board for review. If you're in the Zoom meeting, you can type your comment in the chat, and those again will be recorded and provided to the board as well.
In the Q&A.
In the Q&A function, please provide those in the Q&A function. And then you can also submit comments directly to the board. And then the upcoming meeting is at Valley Water headquarters at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. And all of the comments that are received either on the comment cards, via Zoom, or directly by the board, all of those will be considered by the board prior to that meeting. They'll be reviewing those, and then the board will consider certification of the final EIR and approval of the project at that meeting. And so with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Wendy, for that very thorough and great presentation. The document you referred to, we have a printed out version sitting in the back table. If you're a speed reader, you might be able to get through parts of it, but it's also available in many places online. The presentation materials you just saw, the PowerPoint, is also already on our Valley Water website for this project, so you're welcome to peruse that as well. For the 50 people in the room, there are over 40 people on Zoom, and for the people on Zoom, there are over 50 people in the room. So that way you know exactly what's going on. And we're happy now to take questions. I do have extra, this microphone's going to get off.
Yeah.
The 50-50 chance there. So we do have extra comment cards. If you want to submit them in writing, you're welcome to do so. Or I can come around and share the mic with you, and you can ask. And we have some. And if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand or put those in the Q&A box. But with that, we'll get started on taking your comments.
And ask it out loud.
The people online will be able to hear you. So all of you.
I just have a question on how Valley Water plans to maintain the aquifers during construction.
That's a great thing for the board to consider as a part of it. And there we go.
You hear me? Is this good?
Yes.
Yeah, so some of the elements I mentioned, the Cross Valley Pipeline extension will allow us to supplement imported water flows that will go into the aquifers during construction while Anderson is basically out of service. So that will contribute to it. And also the Coyote Dam is actually upstream, actually just below the bottom of that photo you see there. And we will be bypassing flows through Coyote Reservoir and through Anderson Reservoir during construction when the water is available to keep groundwater recharge happening.
So bypassing it into Coyote Creek, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. I have another one here in the room.
What will be, or where will be the ultimate disposal sites or sites for the spoil that is generated in the dam project?
Yeah, so that was on one of the slides that showed the stockpile and staging areas. The disposal sites are actually within the reservoir itself. So it's kind of laid out, yeah, layered into a deeper part of the reservoir. So buried where the water will eventually be. Yeah.
So the capacity of the reservoir will be decreased.
Somewhat. There's also a borrow area within the reservoir area as well, so it's kind of a balance.
It'll even out. Terrific. Another question in the room here? Here you go, sir.
Thank you. First of all, great presentation, really appreciate it. I thought it was well done. 2 points I'd like to make. My understanding of reading the EIR, which is over 2,000 pages, so it's not an easy read. First question is on the stockpile areas. You've got a ton of them right in front of the Holiday Lakes homes, and you've mentioned increased haul trips. In my understanding of reading the EIR is you're going to be running trucks 24/7 for good chunks of the year for like 6 years. 24/7 in front of our homes all night long. Those trucks are not quiet. They have backup horns. What are you doing to do that? I know this was questions that were submitted, and the proposal at that time was at night, maybe use the stockpiles on the north end of the lake versus the south end of the lake in front of the homes. But I did not see that addressed in the revised EIR. Can you tell me what your plan is with that?
Yeah, that's giving you some pretty detailed specifics on the contents of the environmental impact report.
Homes.
Right, yeah, so basically the intention of the environmental impact report is to lay out all the potential impacts. It likely won't be for 6 years, it likely won't be 24/7, right? So we'll do our best to limit the impacts, but we have to create a upper bookend of those impacts in the report so that we can then mitigate the impacts as best as possible, if that makes sense.
It does. It doesn't really answer it, but
Yeah.
understood. The second item I'd like to address very quickly is on the wildfire side. My understanding of looking at the EIR again is that basically states that this project isn't really increasing our risk of wildfire, but you are looking at potential things you can do about it, but kind of saying there's no change. However, if we've learned anything from Pacific Palisades, empty lakes are not conducive to putting out fires. And we're going to have an empty lake for a very long time. And up in that neighborhood along the lake, Holiday Lakes, it's a high-risk fire area. If a fire starts in there, good luck stopping it. Now with the lake there, you can. The helicopters come in, get water, and put it out, and so we've always had that. Because of this project, we are not going to have that. So it does increase our fire risk, not the chance of a fire occurring, but greatly increasing the likelihood of not being able to put it out quickly or effectively without the lake. And for that reason, that is one of the key reasons why the neighborhood is looking for, hey, a second way out, something to help the residents. Sure, loss of your house is a terrible thing. Loss of lives is a much worse thing. And if we get a big conflagration like Pacific Palisades, that one road out just isn't going to cut it. And so I'm hoping that you guys will really relook at that based on the recent problems in LA.
Thank you for that. Rico? If we have a drought season, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 year, will you continue to work or do you have a stop date during the winter season?
Yeah, hard to predict when we'll have a heavy rainfall season as we move into fall. But if we do have a dry spring, we could certainly begin work somewhat earlier and get an earlier start in that dry season. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say, so the environmental permits are what define the work windows. And so if we have a really dry season on both ends, we can ask to start work early, but starting work early is somewhat limited because if we happen to get a really big rainstorm, then we potentially have water quality issues. That's the main thing that those permits are trying to protect is the water quality of Coyote Creek and the surrounding area. So on the back end of a really dry season, we have the ability to ask for extensions to work further into the winter, as long as the conditions are dry, because there's really no difference. And then as soon as we start seeing rain in the forecast, although this is a big project, so it takes a lot more work to close it down than the average project, but it does extend the amount of time that we have during those seasons to actually get out and do the work. But we have to go back through, to the agencies, request extensions, get approvals, and then we can work for longer periods potentially.
How many of those agencies are issuing permits for this project?
So if we're gonna extend a work window, we have to go back to the Army Corps, the water boards, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So all of them are involved in protecting water quality. And so the project will have a permit through each of those agencies for the project. And so depending on what all the requirements are for each permit, we basically review the permit conditions, go back and say how we can still meet the conditions that we are meeting during the dry season through the extension of the wet season, and then they'll approve us or not approve us to extend work window.
Thank you. See a question over here.
Okay, my question is just an expansion of the gentleman's question there. Is there any plan to build an emergency outlet road on the north end of Holiday Lake through that gate into Roseman Park, through it and down to the parking lot of the dam? I heard rumors of that. I'm just asking the question, is there a plan to do that? And if so, those would be specifics.
So that's outside of our jurisdiction, and so that would be more a county question than a Valley Water question.
That was addressed at one of our earlier community meetings by the county when they were here, if I remember right.
Yeah, now I have also a related question to the wildfire management, risk management. We are some of the several hundred people who live at the very end of Holiday Drive. And so we've always counted on Rosendin Park as being a potential escape in case we are trapped by the fire, because when several thousand people try to escape through Don Avenue, you know what's going to happen. And so we are concerned with the Rosendin Park closure plans, and we are also concerned with how the escape will be affected by that, and if you have any plans to provide for the escape during the construction.
So what I can say is included in our responses and comments. I really can't speak off the cuff at the meeting. As I was saying, we can respond to questions about the process, but we can't respond to specific questions outside of what's been included in the responses to comments. So again, that would be something where your comment, if you want to write it down and submit it to the board, all of those comments are going to be considered by the board prior to the certification of the final EIR and approval of the project. And so that's a time to go to look at what we provided in the final EIR and then ask questions beyond that. So that's as much as I can offer for tonight. Yeah, so if you can write it down on the comment cards, or you can also submit it directly to the board as well. But any comments that are written down tonight, we're going to transcribe and provide to the board. So everything will
We'll bring some cards out to folks that want to fill those out.
I have a question. Your document is so long. It's the residents of Holiday Lake Estate and the Oak over there. Could we have like a summary or a shortened document that will only put the relevant effects on our everyday life, like the day that you will start work, the day that you will end work, the hours that the trucks will be around, this effect that will affect our everyday life. If you can put a document, a summary, that each house in Holiday Lake Estate will get it, instead of like a generic huge document that nobody reads, or it's really hard to read, okay? So to simplify it and bring it to the people, because you are talking in your document about protecting the environment, the fishes, but I think you didn't think about the people that lives around it. In this aspect, in the aspect of the wildfire, we would like to see what are your plans in case of a wildfire? What will be the evacuation route? And we expect an answer. We don't want like you excuse us in generic answers. This is not us. This is the county. It's not sufficient. We want to know what happens. We are the people. Our lives matter. It's the life of the people that you want to make this dam better to save all the life that in a case of earthquake, the dam will collapse. A lot will suffer. So also in a case of a fire, of a wildfire, it will be the same and we will suffer. Our life, it matters the same as the other life that in the case of if the dam will collapse. So I think you need to again, think of the big picture and take a step back to see what you didn't think and to give us relevant answers and not just to put it, it's not our responsibility.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that quickly. The environmental impact report is comprehensive. It follows a legal path through CEQA. So that's why it is comprehensive and long and covers quite a few different topics. However, we will be communicating to the public through various channels, through our website, through Nextdoor, and we can even send out mailers. We'll continue to have public meetings like this one in South County to update the public in the local area on the project and where we're at and what's upcoming as far as other reports and other information that develops as we approach the project.
And well, if I could add, Gianna Escobar, if you could raise your hand. She is the community liaison for this project. She's sitting up doing the Zoom right now in the front, and her email is in a lot of the materials. If you ever have a question, you're welcome to email her, and she will make sure that to get the answer. The contractor to build this next phase, we're not even at that point yet. So to be able to tell you when a truck is coming, that's way too far away. We don't even have the permits to build the project yet. Got it.
There's something that they picked on everyday
Got it.
and they want to know.
And as we get closer, once the contractor is selected, there will be a much more specific information coming out about that. But, got it. But we're still in the very early planning and permitting stage of this project. But Gianna will be able to make sure, like, as we talk about some of the other parts of this with concrete trucks and things, we make sure to notify people that those are coming. We got one question here.
So it's actually kind of a statement. I'm Sean Mulligan, one of the directors at Holiday Lake Estates, and I wrote about the 77 pages comment on the draft EIR, and then I did most of the work with our attorney for wildfire and wild pig mitigation. And then there are 10 measures that we suggest that we are requesting in our letter. I just wanted to give you more detail on it because they're not quite as accurate as I can make them now by speaking. So one was erect a fence at Rosedale Park with gate or opening for evacuation purposes. This is actually a wild pig mitigation measure. You mentioned that you're going to do mitigation of the wild pigs for 5 years. You may or may not be successful. We may want to do 3 years at the beginning and then 2 years towards the end and install a fence at Rosedale Park to prevent them from getting back in. That is feasible, but that's primarily a wild pig mitigation measure. It should have been a wild pig. Install a rapid configuration fence around the lower meadow that can allow entry by cars quickly during a wildfire if the lower meadow is needed for its temporary refuge area. So this is a nexus between the wildfires and wild pigs. We have a 4.7 acre parcel that has been relentlessly attacked by wild pigs. The city of Morgan Hill requested that we keep it watered so that it is a bona fide temporary refuge area. It's been attacked by wild pigs. It's a tripping hazard right now for all the people matter that they leave behind. We're probably going to have to install a fence around that, and we'd like you to pay for that and a gate that can open that we can take in cars quickly off of Holiday Drive if East End's compromised. So it's sort of both a life safety issue and a wild pig issue. 4 with clear, thick brush and a regular schedule for managed fuel available for wildfires. That is in Rosedale Park. That got emitted from it. Rosedale Park has a lot of dead fuel. And in the 2018 Firewise assessment for Holiday Lake Estates, there were mitigation measures that they recommended be taken. So either SCC Parks could do that or Valley Water can fund it in the CEQA mitigation measure. discuss and evaluate in detail a fast on-site wildfire in the forthcoming TMP and RES. So it's that specific scenario. The whole reason this dam retrofit is being done is because of the very unlikely scenario that something horrible happens, right? It's a low probability, really high consequence event. Where we're sitting here today would be several feet underwater, we'd all be dead if that dam broke, and we would not have time to escape it on the existing transportation network. The same thing is true up there for wildfire. So it's get with CAL FIRE and pick up some of these horrible scenarios, and you'll find out that, you know, what limitations these TMP and RES are, what needs to be done. 6 was provide funding for education, including educational materials regarding home hardening, facilitating evacuations for those with disabilities and other topics that are relevant. And then we have obviously a lot of people up there who are old and various degrees of infirmity, and those are the ones who actually wind up dying in wildfires. So if you read the research on it, it's people 50 years and older, and then people with access and functional needs. Those are the ones who don't make it out. So we're going to need to do better communication with the 3,400 residents up on that hill. What's up there is basically a small city. We are comparable to the city of Monte Sereno population, 3,400, almost exactly the same. And we have that one evacuation right out, which is Dunn Avenue. So this is climate change. When these Jackson Oaks and Holiday stakes were authorized for construction in the 1960s and 1970s, wildfire was not a horrific, catastrophic problem. It is today. 7, install and maintain electronic road signs, provide information to Morgan Hill residents. This is actually the residents of the hill, those 3,400 residents of the hill, regarding evacuations, wildfire safety, and water reduction programs. I guess put in there anything else the city of Morgan Hill wants to alter, so that it is not a gift of public funds. It really can't be under our control. So give it to the city, and they can put the evacuation measures up and whatever. These are selected in high visibility locations, and also where you would give directions in a wildfire. 9 is install ground mounted long range acoustic devices in Rosamond Park. I think that does make sense, just because makes sense forever, probably, because this is an area where you have people and where wildfires are risk. And then the 10th item was purchase and provide necessary emergency equipment for the approximately 1,100 homes. That's 1135. We're evacuating August 2020 session, include NOA emergency radios. So these are like smoke alarms. We have lots of problems with the cell phone infrastructure up there. It goes down. It was down last week. When we had the public safety power shutdowns in 2019, we lost everything. So no internet, no cell phone, no way of communicating. You're not going to drive a lot of cars around a network of about 30 miles of road and reach people in time just to tell them to evacuate. So there needs to be another mechanism. And what Marin County does is they distribute these NOAA weather radios that can go off at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're not dependent upon the electrical grid. It's just a different communication channel for getting the signal out. And then AM radios broadcast through the emergency evacuation area up to through Henry Cove, so that people have real-time information about how the evacuation is proceeding. If you read the letter from Whitegood, that evacuation can take over 6 hours. I think these are reasonable mitigation measures. They're all well justified. In fact, they're not the opinion of Sean Mulligan. They're all expert assessments on what needs to be done. So that's what we're looking for in the wildfire mitigation measures. And then wild pigs is a more complicated one. I know Wendy said a number of things which are true. They can swim across the lake. They're not quite as bad as the little animals in Jurassic Park, but they're bad. We may be successful with the program that you're undertaking. We may not. In which case, I mean, this may just become the new normal if we're not successful. We'd like that definitely have more input on how that 5-year program is structured. And obviously, we'd like to do this, have a signal from you tomorrow, ideally, how Valley Water intends to proceed. You obviously have our 23-page lawyer letter you're evaluating. So we will make comments at the Tuesday meeting as well, and I guess our attorney will as well. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I see some, we have 2 online. Let's go to the Zoom. Gianna, you need the microphone now.
So the first one I have here is, what is the latest total project cost estimate for the Anderson Dam retrofit plus the Anderson Dam tunnel? So what they're looking for is the actual dam construction and mitigation, not including that FOCP projects?
Yeah, that information is published in our capital improvement program. So you would have to sum up all the FOCP components, which is the 5 I talked about, as well as the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. That sum is $2.3 billion.
Thank you. And then the next one I have is, will beavers be living in Coyote Creek after the habitat is restored?
We can't predict where the beavers will be. I suppose if there's habitat that's adequate, we could have beavers, but I can't speak for that. But there's no reason there wouldn't be beavers, I can say that, but we're not doing anything specifically to enhance habitat for beavers, that's what I can say. We're not one of the species, they're a common species, so we don't, we obviously walk them and we're enhancing habitat because we're making the creek more amenable for steelhead and enhancing the riparian corridor. And so for all animals, there'll be improved conditions, but we aren't doing any specific beavers.
Thank you, Wendy. Got a question over here.
So will the trucks actually be driving on our roads up in Holiday Estates?
There's some plans to have some traffic through Holiday Lake Estates to the boat marina site and potentially to Rosenthal Park, but not as a normal haul route. It's more just to deliver equipment on kind of a very periodic basis, but there will be some occasional traffic. And like I mentioned before, we'll make sure we put out communications when that will be happening, because we don't know exactly when that will be or what the frequency will be, but we anticipate that it will be few and far between.
The roadways are in the lake bed itself.
The haul roads for the material are down in the lake bed, yeah.
So when we're a follow-up, if there's an emergency, will they be instructed to get out of our way and let us out? First,
Yeah, I think if there's an emergency, they would be out of the way, and that would be my
since
assumption.
I would hate for someone to get burned up because the truck won't move.
Thank you. Here we go in the back here.
Bill McPherson, Holiday Lake Estates. And first off, I'd like to thank Sean Mulligan for his excellent comments. Thanks, James. I don't want to have to refer to my notes. That's one thing I'm concerned about is cancer risk in the compliance area. And you're using spatial averaging, which does not reflect higher risk for persons living closest to the stockpiles. So the AIR states a compliance, i.e. less than 10 in a million cancer cases, claiming 9.8, which is really on the edge. Which is to me and to my family is still unacceptable because of the spatial averaging. Spatial averaging just doesn't apply to people living on the lake. Their chance of getting cancer is so much greater. And then I also think that we just deserve full disclosure of raw, unaveraged risk data for all 132 partials in the Holiday Lake Estates. And then even after mitigation, the acute hazard index exceeds legal limits. The acute hazard index is actually 1.5, exceeding legal threshold of 1.0. Valley Water dismisses it as not greater than NEI, but CEQA protects all residents. So I just think that we deserve legally compliant information and mitigation for these affected residents.
So again, I can't respond directly to that outside of what we provided, in the responses to the EIR. But I would encourage you to write your comment down or to submit it so that it's considered by the board. So I just want to make sure that you understand by speaking it tonight, it's not being recorded. So if you want it to be considered by the board and by our staff, prior to the certification, please make sure that you write it down and submit it.
It's being recorded in the meeting, but not in the EIR.
Well, the meeting is being recorded, but just to be clear, to submit information that's going to be reviewed by the board for them to take into consideration to certify the EIR and approve the project, you have to write your comments down on a comment card tonight and then submit them to hand them to Valley Water so that we can transcribe them and provide them to the board. If you're on Zoom, you have to write down your comment in the Q&A portion so that we can again transcribe it and provide it to the board. And then the third option is for you to submit your comments directly to the board. So I just want to make sure that anything that's spoken, again, the meeting is recorded. But we can't guarantee that the board will go back and hear this entire meeting, so please write down your comments and make sure that they're submitted to the board for
And
consideration.
that's by Tuesday.
That's by Tuesday, yes.
Why is it that they're not going to review the minutes of this meeting?
I'm not saying that they're not gonna review the minutes of this meeting, but I'm saying to make sure that your comment is submitted to the board and that it's considered. The three ways to do that are to write it on a comment card, have it in the Zoom Q&A, or you can write it down and submit it directly to the board. But also for so on that card, so that way we also, it gives the board, like, when you go back and listen to a meeting, I mean, I know you can transcribe it perfectly, but when you write it down, we make sure that every single detail that you want us to hear is recorded down and written so that it's everything that you want to be considered is considered. So it's really for, it's to make sure that your message is conveyed clearly to the board for them to consider, and also for staff to consider.
It's well done with the meetings.
And just to be clear, we have 3 board members are in the room here, and one was earlier on Zoom. So they're hearing it, but to see it in writing is they can read the whole thing in comprehensive. Thank you.
Ryan also pointed out, in submitting directly to the board, you can email, so it doesn't have to be written to the board, but you can email it directly to the board.
Before that, thank you. Got a question in the back here?
Hi, everyone. This has been very informational for me. Sean, thank you for your 7 points. I would like to be in contact with you. Could you send those to me, please? And perhaps with the help of the city, I can address some of those. Now, for the lady who had a lot of concerns, she talked quite a long time. I think what she is looking for is a fact sheet, okay? I have read these documents that you're talking about that are thousands of pages long. She needs bullet points. And so that's what I think the water district needs to deal with next, is to, of course, this can't be, set in stone, we're going to hold you this type of document, but at least it's going to give her and anyone else that has the same concerns something to refer to. And if they don't have it in right there in front of their face, maybe it's 10 pages long and not 1,000 pages long. So I'd like to see that happen. And now I actually have my question. Is this project fully funded already?
Yes, the project is fully funded in our budget, and it's funded through our water utility rates. So the rates that water users pay throughout the county go to pay for this project. We are actively looking for grants and additional funding. We have secured what they call WIFIA loan financing through the federal government. That's through the EPA. And that can fund up to half of the project through loans that are low interest, because that helps ease the burden on our ratepayers as well. But we are still actively, we actually have an application out right now for, I think, $25 million that we asked for, that we're looking to pursue. We'll continue to do that throughout the project to ease the burden on our ratepayers.
And some from the state of clean water.
That's right.
And is any of this funding from the Army Corps of Engineers?
Currently, no, the WIFIA program is through the EPA. Yeah, so there's no funding through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you very much.
So far.
Thank you for those questions. Council member, we'll go right over here.
My name is David Fraser. I live up in Holiday Lake Estates, and I know this isn't being submitted to the board. I guess I'll follow up with a written email. But I want to address one thing, and that's the fire danger up there. I think the perception of the homeowners is that that's being downplayed. And I think the lesson from Los Angeles is that when there are mistakes or things downplayed, or what can be perceived later as not having been proactive enough, it really puts those leaders in a tough spot. So kind of fast forwarding in Anderson Canyon, which is no longer Anderson Lake, what are those things that in the rear view mirror would really look bad that we're not doing? I think in no particular order. One thing is the state fire maps, the fire severity zone maps, I believe are flawed now, because they don't take into consideration, to my knowledge, that it's no longer a reservoir, it's a canyon. That's a big deal because those fire severity maps drive insurance, they drive they assess the amount of risk, but they also determine and help determine people's decisions, whether they want to stay up there, live up there, get insurance, not get insurance. So that's important to consider that because we want to make sure we have an accurate assessment of what the situation is today. Number two is that the wind patterns up there have changed. The lake always acted, and I lived on the reservoir, what was the reservoir then, on the canyon now. It's always been windy up there, but the wind patterns since the lake has been drained to dead pool are different. They're hotter in the summer months and they're drier. You can feel it, you can see it, and that's a fact. It's just something that is it's happening up there. So that impacts your fire risk. You have higher winds, you have drier winds, lower humidity than you had in the past. The third is that now that there's no water in the lake, or that it's been intermittent over the last few years, there's a ton of dry brush in that lake bed. As a homeowner, if my weeds are more than, I think it's 4 inches high, is a county restriction, then they can cite me and under weed abatement, and I have to correct that. Now, you can walk down in that lake bed, and there's areas where you're up to your hips in tumbleweeds and brush, and it's dry. In July and August, it is dry. And one thing that I want to make sure everybody understood that Sean said, when you're up there and PG&E does a safety outage or whatever they call it, when it's a high wind situation, so they're shutting down your power deliberately so that they don't spark potentially a fire, you're up there with no communication, no cell phone, no internet, nothing. All you have are the hum generators, and you can see people burning candles inside their house, which are two of the biggest causes of fires there are. And you have no way of knowing if something's going on elsewhere in the neighborhood. And that, as a homeowner up there, it's kind of a stark reality of living in a wildfire zone. But this is making it worse. And I've witnessed, I believe, 3 fires in the 20 years I've lived up there that were immediately on the other side of the lake. None of them got to the point where they got named. And that's because there was certain process and protocol where first thing you see is the smoke. Second thing you hear, the fire trucks in the distance as they're struggling to get up Dunn Avenue. Then the helicopters come in. And the helicopters come in with their buckets and they either douse the fire or they keep the fire at bay until the tankers can come in and put it out completely. And it's been like clockwork. We've been very lucky up there. Now it's a whole that you're taking out the key component. And that's something, again, to me, 5 years from now, there's a massive fire up there. And the fire marshal said, again, Sean alluded to this, and I want to make sure it's not glossed over. The previous fire marshal stated, it's not a matter of if there's a fire up there, it's a matter of when, okay? We're talking Oakland Hills type fire, we're not talking a brush fire in somebody's backyard. So losing the ability to helicopters to access water to mitigate fires is a big concern. And then on top of it, you have all that dry brush down there. And I can apparently drive Gilroy in June and buy fireworks and then shoot them off my front yard, not legally, but people do it. And it's happened on the other side in Woodchopper Park. And that's how fires are started. I'm not going to get into whether or not we should sell fireworks. I think it's ridiculous. But the fact is, it can happen. And we have so many years in the dry when that lake's going to be empty. It really is, it's a huge fire risk. And I do think you're downplaying it. And I would suggest, just for your own peace of mind and everybody's peace of mind, and hopefully to eliminate the risk of something happening in the future, that take it seriously. We're not all wrong. We're not all crying wolf here. These are serious concerns, and the fire risk up there is drastically elevated from what it was a few years ago. And you all are responsible for this. That's the reality of it. It's your project. This is 2008. When Randy yelled over my fence, hey, Fraser, you hear? They're draining the lake. It was originally a 3-year project. It was $63 million. Here we are, 17 years later, and it's going to be another 10 years. And that risk, like Sean said, it's high consequence. We're just extending, we're pushing the envelope, And something bad could potentially happen up there. And I encourage you all to work as expeditiously as possible and take this as seriously as possible. Because I don't think the homeowners feel you all. Just my opinion.
Thanks for the comment, by the way. I've been working with Director Varela, and we are looking to coordinate a day where we can actually put together another community meeting where we can talk about fire risk, water resource availability, working with Valley Water, the county, CAL FIRE, the city of Morgan Hill. And so we're going to be working on getting that date together, hopefully something we can make happen in March. And we'll put that information out so we can address some of the concerns that you're talking about. And again, try to make sure that plenty of information is available for everybody to hopefully calm their nerves, but also make sure that they know what resources are available. So we'll keep that.
Thank you, Mayor Turner. Okay, any other questions on Zoom, Gianna? We got some in the back here, sure thing. Just doing my check.
Number of things. Are you going to totally drain the lake? Or will there be a dead pool of water there?
Yeah, so when we get into year one of the construction, we do have to get down to the bottom of the dam, which will require pretty much a full draining of the lake. There'll be a small coffer dam and a small pool behind that as we divert the flows through the portion of Coyote Creek between Anderson and Coyote Dam. But yeah, it'll basically be fully drained.
Okay. And Coyote will have water in it for the water resource Dave was talking about, to potentially put out. I watched it put out those fires. I also have a waterfront lot. And so Coyote will have water, so the helicopters could transit up there 5 miles, come back and dump. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. Coyote Dam will be operated the same way it's operated now.
Okay. Another subject, cost. $2.3 billion is a eye-watering number. How much is that going to cost everybody in this room? Each. Right now we're paying over $100 a month. How are we going to pay $2.3 billion? These folks in this room.
I don't have that right off the top of my head, but our financial folks, Valley Water, have done analyses similar to that show what the average monthly increase would be year over year based on the increase to water rates. Typically, those are shown by the total increase to the water rate year over year, and that's the rate that we apply to our water retailers. But it doesn't include Anderson alone. But typically, these monthly impacts are like in the $10 to $15 range per year. That's the increase each month.
I see. So you're gonna pay interest on $2.3 billion and charge us $15 a month to pay that off.
That's the increase each year. Yeah. So that's about the average off the top of my head, but that data is out there, and that's the total.
Interesting. That's very good. Thanks. I have a waterfront lot like Dave. I have watched 52 pigs in one sounder cross the creek. Cross the creek into Holiday. So I know that Valley Water contends that pigs aren't Valley Water's problem, but I watch them every evening just about walk in right past Dave's house more or less and into our complex. So the problem's not going to go away for the next 10 years. It's only going to get worse. Is it being seriously looked at?
It is. So Valley Water is looking at it, not just, I think, what our response says is that it's looking at it from a regional perspective. So it's taking in all of the different Valley Water facilities. So we're not addressing it from a project specific. But yeah, John's gonna go up and you can speak to it as well. But that's why we're entering into the program with the USDA because feral pigs are a regional issue. So we understand that they're an issue here, but they're an issue all over. So that's why we're entering into the bigger program.
Thank you. My name is John Boucher. I'm a deputy officer over watershed stewardship and planning. And yes, it is an issue we're taking quite seriously. This is an issue for us, not just here, but we manage a lot of properties in the upper watershed for conservation purposes. This has been a long-standing, ongoing issue for us as well. And so we're trying to address this in a comprehensive manner. So one of the reasons we are partnering and I've got under contract with the USDA is because they actually get some federal funding to do this work. So we can leverage our funds even more. They have permits and mechanisms and protocols that aren't readily available to everyone to use for these sorts of efforts. And we can also, there are other large landowning agencies that are also cooperating with USDA. So they can take a look at the broader landscape, they can understand movement patterns, they can try and target those areas that are going to best actually impact the population. So instead of doing it just very, on one site, that's not going to do anything for the population. So by partnering with the USDA and some of these other large landowning public agencies, we can have a broader strategy to look at what might actually be effective. So we're really trying to put our dollars in a place where we can actually have some efficacy. So we are taking it quite seriously. Thanks.
Okay, speaking of dollars again, we in this room have paid $24 million to cool the water of Coyote Creek. I grew up in a place called Minnesota, and I used to stand in water this deep fishing, and 6 months later chopped a 4-foot deep hole in the lake, that same lake. Why did we have to pay $24 million to cool Coyote Creek? I mean, it's just hard for me to comprehend. We could have gotten a 5-gallon bucket of fish fry at the end of this project, poured it in the creek, and had more fish in there than we will for this whole project. And it wouldn't have cost us $24 million.
I assume you're referring to the chillers project.
Yeah, the chillers, one
Yeah.
I walked by and looked at here, and them
Yes.
boring us the creek.
So that was a condition that was mandated to us by the National Marine Fisheries Service. So while we don't have the reservoir in place, because as you know, the water at the bottom's cooler, right? And so that's the water we send down the creek. When we're supplementing that water with imported water, it's coming through the pipe. And it is at an elevated temperature that was of concern to National Marine Fisheries. So this was a mechanism by which they thought we should cool the water coming in from San Luis Reservoir through the pipe to get it down to a more acceptable temperature for fish.
Does anybody push back on those numbers? How many in this room think that's an outrageous number to pay? $24 million to cool creek. Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to comprehend. I can't imagine we don't push back on this.
No, I'm still agree.
We
never worked.
We did push back. This
Not
is
very hard. I mean, I
This,
can't comprehend this.
but to get permits to do the project, this is what was mandated. National Marine Fisheries is the agency that is in charge of the federally threatened steelhead species, and so. Yes.
So what you heard was this is mandated by the federal government that we retrofit Anderson Dam. At the same time, we were mandated by the state of California to reconfigure the outlet. Now, we listen to all of you, and we're asking you to continue to communicate to the board of directors, because we do communicate to our electeds in the federal level and also at the state level. They are our communications, and they are the people that you reach us, we speak to them, and we try to come to some kind of a solution. But when this was mandated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to lower the dam, and by the way, here's another factoid. When the dam was built in the 1950s, it took 2.5 years to go online. There were no agencies, there were no organizations, there were no approval processes. Now we have 15 regulatory groups, from environmental groups to counties, et cetera, that we must comply with before we can turn dirt on any of this project at all. So I read your frustration. I hear your frustration. But understand, we're not in control of this situation. The federal government and the state are mandating it. We're just complying with their demand. So we're listening to you and we want your comments, but please understand that we're in a position that's necessary to complete this. And costs continue to escalate. We're trying our best to minimize that. We have contractors that we negotiate with. They have union labor that negotiate their contracts. There are many things that we're not talking about tonight that you're not aware of. But you could go on our website. Please attend our meetings. We're all available virtually, every single one of our board meetings, and you can comment. You could take the time to ask questions at those meetings. I just wanted to make that comment to you. Thank you.
we are approaching. Oh, Brian, go ahead. We're approaching the end of our time, and so we appreciate it. But if you would like to use these comment cards or email the board or put it in the Q&A function online, we will then get that information to our board for their consideration before they vote on this on the 25th. We welcome everyone to attend that board meeting, either in person or virtually. Your written comments on the EIR or project are submitted in the Q&A, and comment cards will be shared with all of the board members, including those who are not here. We encourage you to provide them in writing. Before we close today's meeting, we ask that you consider learning more about a critical valley water effort and provide your input for our water supply master plan. What will our water supply needs be in 2050? This is the group and the team that comes up with that, and we need to hear from you. And thank you again to our audience for all your feedback. Your input is so important and really informs both the staff and the board of your thoughts. As this project moves forward, we'll continue to keep you informed with regular updates, and you can go to the project webpage at valleywater.org for postings. We put them on Nextdoor. We send constant contact emails out, so you can go in and sign up and receive all of those. Many of you probably already are getting our emails, and we will be having regular public meetings as well. And again, I mentioned Gianna is our community liaison, and and your director, John Varela, will also, you can always email our board. And just wanted to highlight our former community liaison, Tony Mercado, who's retired now, has still come to attend this meeting. So you can quit the water district, but you can't quit the Anderson Dam retrofit project. So with that, I'll say good night, and thank you all, and fill out those cards, and you can give them to Jose in the back of the room. Thank you, everyone.